You may have noticed that as you're using your iPad, every time you move it or turn it in a certain way, the orientation or the virtual orientation of the screen changes along with your movements. For people using VoiceOver, this can get a little bit irritating. So as I'm trying to make a movement, I hear landscape or I hear portrait. What we're going to be doing in this video is looking at how can we lock that orientation so that it doesn't keep moving when we don't want it to. Right now, the iPad is in portrait orientation with the home key at the 6 o'clock position. If I tilt it or if I turn it into a landscape orientation, which means the longer side will now be at the bottom and top of the screen.
Landscape. Home button to the right.
It actually tells me what the orientation is. So I'm in landscape position, which means the longer sides are at the top and bottom, and my home key is to the right. Similarly, if I flip it in the opposite direction,
landscape. Home button to the left.
It always gives me information of how the device is oriented. But for somebody like myself who uses VoiceOver, this information sometimes is not needed, or I don't want it to keep changing orientations as I'm moving or as I'm working with the device. So we're going to look at locking the screen. Now, in order to do that, I'm going to introduce you to a new concept, something called the app switcher. The app switcher is a feature of the iPad that brings up a window that lists the most recently used apps. Now, for those of you who are new users to the iPad, you may only have 1 or 2 pages of apps. But once you start accumulating multiple applications and have many, many windows worth of apps, this app switcher will come in very handy because it will bring up the most recently used apps and allow you to choose from that list as opposed to looking through the multiple pages for the single app that you are interested in activating. So before I activate the app switcher, I'm going to shift the device into the orientation that I'm interested in.
Landscape. Home button to the right.
The orientation I'm choosing is landscape with the home key on the right side or at the 3 o'clock position. Most stands or most covers that have stands built into them orient the iPad automatically in this position. The reason this is done is because when the home key is to the right side, the lower edge of the device has no buttons. So there's no buttons that are being obstructed. The volume control and the mute button are now at the top left part of the screen so that I can access them even while I'm working with my device if it's in a stand. So I'm going to start the app switcher by pressing the home button 2 times.
App switcher, Safari. Double tap to open.
Safari is the first thing that's listed here in my app switcher because it was the last app that I used. So in order to move to the page where I can lock the orientation, I'm going to use a 3-finger swipe. So I'm going to take 3 fingers and I'm going to swipe them from the left side of my iPad to the right side of my iPad. And what that will do is it'll move me to the previous page of the app switcher. When I do this, you'll hear that it's moving me to page 1 of 3.
Page 1 of 3.
Here I'm going to look for the orientation lock button, or as the iPad calls it, the rotation lock.
Brightness, 5th rotation lock, unlocked, button.
Okay. It's currently unlocked, so once I double tap it, it will lock and then it would tell me what position the iPad is in.
Rotation lock, landscape locked.
So it's locked in landscape position. So now, anytime I move it or anytime I shift the orientation, it will maintain this position with the home key to the right. I'm going to deactivate or dismiss the app switcher. I can do that by either pressing the home key or I can find the dismiss app switcher button on the screen.
Dismiss app switcher. Double tap to dismiss the app switcher.
Okay, and I'm going to double tap.
Messages.
Okay.
Double tap to open.
Now, our orientation is locked. So if I shift the device or if I shift the iPad to a portrait orientation, you'll see that for those of you who can see, the icons are now lying on their side. I'm going to turn it again so that the volume controls are at the bottom of the screen or at the bottom edge of the device. And right now you'll see that the icons are upside down for those of you who are able to see them. The correct orientation or the correct way to hold it now is with the home key to the right and the edge with no buttons at the bottom. One way to check the virtual orientation of your device is very simple. Find the dock. If your finger is towards the bottom of the screen and you hear
Dock, Safari.
dock, right? That means you're in the correct orientation. If you hear dock when you touch the upper part of the screen, that means you're holding it upside down. And that's how we lock the orientation of our screen.